Okay, this is March 1st, 2023, and I'm going to try to do a better job in these videos, give you some background. So in 2017, the court took away 6 children from my wife and I, and one stepdaughter, her stepdaughter, my daughter, based on testimony that she made when I refused to give her a passport at the age of 16 to go to Germany with a 72-year-old man named John Krinkle. And he had already bought her tickets and showed her the tickets and said, "We're going to Germany." And I said it wasn't appropriate and I'm not going to go along with it. And so my daughter sent me a threatening email message and said, "If you don't sign the passport application, I will make you sorry. You will regret it." Well, I still didn't sign the passport application. So that was in December of 2017 on the 7th. And DHS Oregon, with this monster Laurel Levine, came with Mark Walsh, and they took all of the other 6 kids, and they tore my year-and-a-half girl and my 3.5-year-old boy out of their mother's arms, screaming, and put them in a van and took them away and split them all up. And that was in 2017. We are now 5 years and 3 months later. Okay, so the judge Norm Hill ruled in December, early December, late November of 2022, that he was changing the plan from reunification, which DHS never made any effort to reunify anybody, and CASA never made an effort to reunify anybody, and he was going to change it to the plan to adoption. Okay, now that has to go through a long process. So he commented that children had been in purgatory for 5 years. Well, no kidding. And so that was the events in early December 2022. So let's see. My wife's attorney was pretty good at the start, this guy by the name of Gary. And then he told her, don't contest anything, just go along with the flow, let me handle it. And then nothing came of it. Okay. Now, originally he had fought for the fact that DHS, every time they turned around, jerked the farm visits that the kids had to the farm to see their mother, jerked them away all the time. And so then when he was no longer doing anything active on the case, they just started doing that again. So back about 4 or 5 weeks ago, for no reason at all, they canceled the farm visits and said there weren't going to be any more. The judge had ruled that the thing was headed for adoption, so it didn't matter. And as I mentioned, I had a little train set up for my boy, and they heard about that, and they were going to make absolutely sure that he didn't get to play with that little train at the house. Okay, so that's sort of a backstory of what's going on here. So 4 kids have aged out. They're home. I don't live on the farm anymore because they tried to blame me and so use me against my wife. So now I'm going to slow down a little bit now that I've given you the backstory. And this is about the case at the DHS office in Dallas, Oregon. I'm going to slow down, fill you in on some more details. Okay, so our first caseworker was Rose Carpenter, and she said, little infants, we're going to try to get you more visitation time. It never happened. And then she moved back to Yamhill office, didn't show up in the case anymore, and we got this troll, Aubrey Havocost, and she peroxide blonde, and she was a mean person, a cruel person, and she acted like Aka language. What's that? It's not important. And then at the time, my wife could barely speak English, and so she just blew it off like it's no big deal. And so I confronted her about the fact that she separated the 2 babies from their older siblings, and I said they're going to lose their language. Plus, it's very traumatic on them not to have anybody that they recognize. And she said, Aubrey Havocost said this, and it will never, ever be forgiven. She said, those 2 little kids can learn their language again when they get older. So you don't have to ask me what I think about Aubrey Havocost, okay? May it haunt her into her old age if she makes it in a care home what she did to those two little kids. May it keep her awake at night. May it remind her of the depths of human depravity that lives in her soul. Okay, so then we ended up with Ross Waite. He was another liar for DHS, got out of the Yamhill office, an extremely obese slob of a guy. And then we ended up, after him, we ended up with Sarah Scott, who is deceptive and devious. I think I wrote down a list somewhere here. Maybe I can find it because I think it's an important list. And I was thinking about all the things they've done to our family when I made this list. And I don't know if I can't find it. Oh, yeah, here it is. Okay, so I made this list of adjectives that we have experienced as a family dealing with DHS and ways I would describe them. And I'm going to go through it real quick. And maybe you'll see here, has this happened to you? Have you had your kids taken? Have you been treated this way? Maybe some of these words will ring a bell. That they're vile people, the caseworkers, lying, scheming, conspiring, accusing, confusing, falsifying, perjuring, deceptive, distorting, excusing, cruelty, abuse, treachery, portraying, implying, aggravating, antagonizing, misleading, tricking, feigning, cheating, dividing, creating stress, creating division, alienating, denying, isolating, torturing, interfering, lecturing, racist, classist, read my own writing, intimidating, nitpicking, bullying, retaliatory, controlling, manipulative, dismissive, avoiding, condescending, projecting, ignoring, twisting, misportraying, duplicitous, deceitful, liars, and falsifiers. Maybe somewhere in that list you can see what you've gone through. I think pretty much this is all from our experience. So it came up what I witnessed, what my wife witnessed. Okay, so, and I may go back and forth here, but that's sort of the basis. So right now we're with caseworker Sarah Scott. We're with Judge Norm Hill. We're in the Dallas County Courthouse. And we have, I think it's Sarah Hernandez is the DOJ attorney. We used to have, Houston. She went on down the road for the DOJ. We had Brian Raymer, this little fat fart before that. Well, he never got along with the judge. So anyway, it's interesting. They all want Judge Hill to leave, okay? And Judge Hill wanted to go on the appeals court, but the appeals court doesn't want him either. Okay, so just a little bit of background. This is a fast-moving video. I'll try to slow it down at some point. Got a lot of things in my mind about what happened in court today. So today was a court because Gary, the lawyer, and I won't mention his last name because I'm not trying to beat up on the guy, but it is a fact what happened. Gary, the lawyer, dropped the ball, did not communicate well with my wife, and when DHS would beat her up, increasingly he took no action and certainly no timely action. So today she said, I don't want you. You're fired. I don't want to deal with you anymore. I want to deal with the translator named Benz anymore. I'm done with this whole nonsense. So, and we only had a translator because one of my original lawyers beat up on DHS and said, no, the law says you have to provide her with the translator. So they had to fly in translators from Bangkok and Tokyo to do the trial. Okay. So don't tell me this isn't about money. It sure as hell is. So anyway, my wife fired her attorney. So he put in a motion to be relieved from the case. And so today's hearing was about that. It was supposed to be over in like 15 minutes. It's supposed to go really fast. And so it was really tough for my wife because it was basically facing off with somebody that she felt done dirty by. And I wasn't sure how it would go or unravel or whatever. I thought, oh God, here we go. So anyway, she has a translator. It's Ben's lady on the phone from wherever land. And so my new lawyer's there because my other lawyer retired, and so my new lawyer's there, and but this is about her. So she says, I want to talk, and so the Judge Hill lets her talk, and so she says, I've been put all through these things by DHS. They treat me really badly. They take away my visits. I have a great house. I have food prepared. I have fun things for them. I got rooms furnished for them. I got all kinds of toys. I have a great time. I got an advocate named Jessie, and she watches, and I just want somebody to tell me if I do something wrong, don't do that, and I won't do it. And I just want people to otherwise leave me alone. Okay, I want to deal with somebody straight. And I had this lady named Shannon for 4 years, and she was great, and she never monkeyed with me or made trouble. She just said, this is the rules, and that's what I did. No problems. She just left me alone and let me spend time with my kids. Well, now I got this lady named Bev, and then the caseworker, Sarah, and they sit there and they nitpick and intervene and interfere the whole damn visit. And so they treat me really bad. So this was stuff that she told me to all the time. So she went on and on about all these things and that my lawyer's not helping me. And so I don't want him anymore. And so they talked about it a while, and then they said, well, Mr. McDaniel wrote an email to the lawyer, her lawyer, and the judge says, where's that email? So they dug it up. And it was an email thread. It was actually 2 emails from me. And so the lawyer, Gary, said, well, I got the email on Saturday, but I had already been fired on Friday. And so I wasn't going to file my motion until Monday because it's a work day, So, so I had already been fired. And so my wife said, well, yeah, I fired him 4 times. Told him I didn't want to see him again. I didn't want to be here today. I did nothing. I didn't want nothing to do with the guy, something along those lines. And so some of this stuff I'm going to talk about is going to be things that she's repeatedly said to me and may not be all that she said to her lawyer, but I was on the conversation, so I don't know. But she told me that, hey, I fired this guy 4 times. I don't want to see him anymore. I said, okay. So this is where the plot really changes here. Okay, so in 5 years and 3 months, I have never testified because this is a kangaroo court. Okay, these are jackasses. Okay, you got Steve Walls. He's this little tiny prick. Like I said, he's trying to destroy our family, and he got divorced, and his family's destroyed. Okay, how's that work out for you, Steve? For karma. And so he's this little guy. Now he looks like he has AIDS. He's this little skinny guy, and you see all the silver in his hair. It's like, yeah, what goes around comes around. Get used to it, guys. Suck it up. And then you got Sarah Scott, this big blob sitting on the end of the table, with everything's funny to her. This is just, you beat mothers up, you don't give a shit. This is just funny stuff to her. She's the caseworker, okay? And so, I don't know, they said she's got some daughter, goes to Western University in Monmouth. I don't know. Never met the gal, just seen this bag that we always have to deal with. It's this conspiring little nasty, try to make everything difficult, take everything, give nothing, okay? And that's what Gary had said earlier back in August. He says, you guys keep taking from this woman. Okay. So anyway, the judge, my wife went on and on about how bad she was treated by DHS, by Sarah, and said, Steve, he wants to take my children. She said, but you say the reason that you won't give me my children is because of my husband. So why don't you just deal with him? That's separate from me. Give me my children. Okay. So she was very, you'd feel a little bit about throwing under the bus, but no big deal. She was very direct and said, look, this is not my problem. This is his problem. Don't tie it into me getting my kids back. So the judge comes out and said, look, I'm going to say a couple of things. Number one, Judge Hill goes, we've determined, we wrote in stone, and we're God somehow, so that's the way it is. We wrote in stone that you will not keep Mr. McDaniel from coming and seeing your kids without permission. And so that he's a danger. We ruled he's a danger by God. And so you can't be trusted. Basically, they said you're a liar. That's what they said. That's what the judge said, is you're a liar. You cannot be trusted. Okay? And the ruling that he had made in the document from December was in fact false. She never said that. And that's what I'll say to you. She never said that. It's in the record. It's in the translation. She said two things. He's a father, he gets to visit his kids, but only the way DHS says, and for now that's at the DHS office. And I'm fine with it, okay? Anything for her to get her kids back. So he was wrong about that. But he made a ruling based on facts that didn't exist, that a storyline that he made up, not one that she said. And we've always argued that this translator's no good because she doesn't understand what's being said and doesn't translate correctly. And the judge takes advantage of that, said, well, what she just said. No, that's not what she just said. Okay, so you want to know what my problem is with the court is you say she said things she did not say, which are not in the record. Okay? That's number one. Okay? So my wife went on to say that you can give me my kids back, and if I ever let him come visit them without permission, that you ever document, if that ever happens, you can take my kids and I won't say a word. Now, what more could they want? Because these meth moms and everything, they take their kids and then something goes wrong. They send them home and then something goes wrong. They get back into meth or heroin or whatever they do. They let a boyfriend in the house that beats their kids. I don't know, whatever they do. They go back in and take the kids, and the families know that. We all know that. It's all part of the record in all these different cases that they're willing to do that, more than willing, and they do it. Okay, sometimes it may not be justified. Sometimes it probably, I'm sure it is sometimes. And so it's just the way it is. Okay, because so my wife's volunteering for that, saying, you come take the kids if I ever let him come outside of the rules into the house. Okay, and so that she's throwing down the gauntlet to them and saying, do your job, but only your job. Okay, you got a deal, and they never take it because they're dishonest people. Okay. They want those kids no matter what, and that is their goal, and they're never going to let go of that goal. Okay, so he says that. Now, I won't get this all completely in order because there's a lot of stuff going on in here that happened today. So Steve Walls gets up and says, this is long enough going on, and I'm really concerned because it's having negative effects on these kids. And this is my question to you, Steve Numbnut Walls. Do you think this is going away? Read the books. There's tons of books, therapy books, all kinds of stuff on these type of cases. For these kids, this is never going away as long as those children don't get back to their mom. It's never going away. They're going to think about and look for and hope for their mom the rest of their lives. Doesn't matter where they go. And one day they're going to find out about all your lies and all your manipulations. They're going to find out that the foster parents played into your lies, that in the end of the day, those kids really didn't matter because you were willing to lie to keep them from going home. No matter what happens, it's not going away. You can terminate parental rights, it's not going away. Not for those kids, not now, not ever, because there's all these books on what's happened to adopted kids and foster kids and everything. We all know what happens. It doesn't go away. Like you wave some magical wand over it and you think it's going to go away. It's all bullshit. It's not going away. Okay, so that's not a simple solution, right? So anyway, my wife said, hey, take the kids back if I break the rules. She's very straightforward about it. She's far less cowards than all these other people are. Okay, so anyway, this email came out. So the judge says, I want to see that email. So they entered as exhibit. This gets really interesting here. They entered as exhibit. And he reads it. And then he reads the first page and it says, this is a page I wrote to Gary. And I said that my wife doesn't want to retain you as a lawyer and doesn't want to communicate anymore. And she wants a new lawyer. And you have failed because she has the same translator with you that she does with DHS. It's a DHS translator. And that's a violation of her constitutional rights for client-attorney privilege. Okay, so this came from my wife saying, Benz, here's what I have to say to my attorney, and then she can go tell DHS something completely different, or she can give her information, and she works for DHS, so she's not on my side at all. Okay, so there. So that was the first email, but it was a string. So the judge then went on and read the second email, and it says, how could a competent judge allow this bastard situation? How could a competent judge allow the bastard situation like this to exist? Okay. So basically, I was pointing the finger at him because it's his court. All right. And he should know better that my wife has no protection to have her own translator for her lawyer. Okay. So then he said, okay, I'm based on, so that was sort of interesting, because basically I got to tell him what I thought, that he was wrong. And so he didn't have any reply to it. He can say, well, Matthew's wrong. So he said, I think that Matthew is undermining her relationship with her attorney. So then her attorney, Gary, stands up and says, no, she told me I was fired before I got the email. Okay. So then it went on for a while. And then my attorney said, I want to put Mr. McDaniel on the stand. And so put me on the stand. And then Steve Walls asked me, did you write these 2 emails? And I said, I did. And I said, you've said that I'm trying. Oh, so the judge came out and he said, Matthew's intentionally trying to delay the case to make it longer before we can TPR, because we're going to get away with that, right? Okay. So I basically said, the judge is incompetent. He's got a bias, all right? And so then, then I said, when I was on the stand under oath, I said, look, this court's going to do what this court is going to do. So let's just get on with it and get it done. So then Steve Walls said, did you write this part of the Constitution? I said, yeah, that's my translation of what she's telling me. Okay, so I'm in California. She calls me 40 times. Why didn't your sons and daughters do this? I said, they're not home. They're in and out of the house all the time. They're gone. She called me and asked me to do it, so I did it. Okay, and so that's the way it is. And I said, if you want to get this case over with, why don't you get it over with? Because he can't. It's not that simple. He's stupid. Okay, that's why his wife divorced him, because he's stupid. All right. So anyway, so this all came out in the open. So the judge said something to the effect that, okay, we're going to have this TPR case. And my attorney says, no, we don't want you on the case. We don't want you to be the judge for that. And he goes, well, I'd gladly not be the judge for it and give it to somebody else. Well, yeah, that's the case. And so he said, so Mr. McDaniel thinks I'm biased. Well, no kidding. Okay. And I'm going to go into that in a minute. All right. So, because I want to answer directly to why, specifics. Okay. And so it was like a 15-minute meeting that went for like 2 hours and 45 minutes. It went to 5:45. I think nobody could leave to use the restroom or anything. This thing just went on like drag out, knockdown. And so my wife did get to say her piece about what was going on. And I said when I was on the stand that Gary, they had pulled her visits and he had not reacted to it and had not done anything and had not communicated with her, and she expressed this over and over to me and asked me to write the email. Okay, so they really didn't have anywhere to go. I said into the record what I wanted to say about the judge being biased and that her rights were violated, which they were, over and over. Okay, there's a lot of things that came up where she wasn't given the opportunity for consent, and they just thought, well, she's ignorant, she's not clever, and so forth. So then Gary says, look, I don't want to be your lawyer anymore. Okay. So then Steve Walls, he gets up and goes, yeah, I'm like with this. Gary's a really good lawyer and there's no reason to let him go and get a different lawyer. She's had 4 lawyers already. So what? Maybe she's had 4 deadbeat lawyers. Habacost put her on the stand without informed consent. Okay. Let everybody beat up on her, which was really traumatic because she couldn't speak as much English then, and she really had a hard time, and they just beat up on her. And then she had, she had another lawyer, and she basically said, these people are sleeping with DHS. They're just an apologist for DHS. Okay. So that's what happened with Gary. She put it to him and said, you didn't do your job. So Steve Walls gets up and defends him and says, he's a great lawyer. Don't sign off on this lawyer, And then Hernandez, the DOJ attorney, says, oh, yeah, he's a great lawyer. Don't sign off. So they're all beating up on my wife and saying that she's out of her mind and that she has no basis for dislike this lawyer. The only thing that they don't address is he didn't do his job. That's what he's there for. He's supposed to do his job. Okay, so when she tries to communicate with him, he can't just tell her, well, let DHS win all the time. And I said that there have been long problems with the translator when I was on the stand. And I said that, and this was because of between the time when I had attorneys so I could communicate with Gary directly. And I said, look, this translator thing is a big problem. My wife says you say this and that, and I don't know what you said. And I have not in the conversation, so I don't know. But either you said it or you didn't say it, and the translator's screwing her over. One way or the other. Pick your poison. Okay? So Hernandez gets up and says he's a great lawyer and everything, trying to put the rub on my wife that she's off, and and Steve says, look, if you get a lawyer, you can't dismiss him because you don't get the outcome you want, because he did his job, but you didn't get the outcome to make you happy, and so that's tough luck. Well, you're a crock, Steve. It has to do with doing your job, and I'm a witness that Gary did not do his job. Okay, so you address the fact, the specifics of her fact, which he didn't communicate, he didn't push back, he didn't act in her best interests, he didn't do anything. And when I had direct communication with him, he didn't answer emails and say, this is my strategy plan. I was sick. I was this, I was that. This is what I plan to do. And please communicate that to meet you, or I've communicated that to meet you. Nothing. It was a total flatline failure. Okay? So anyway, so it goes on. They all like root and holler for her attorney to hope that he doesn't get dismissed. Well, then it comes up about the TPR. And he says, I will not do that case. I petitioned the court not to do that case because I don't want to act as her lawyer because she won't talk to me. And so how are you going to make me be her lawyer in the first part of the case and then make me be her lawyer on the TPR case? How are you going to appoint a second lawyer to be her first case and then have me come back in as the TPR lawyer? That's not going to work. So the judge goes, well, that's probably true. That's not going to work. And so then it all come up, but you're not going to be our judge, okay? And so my attorney goes, well, we have substantive reasons why we don't want you as the TPR judge, okay? All right. So it was a lot of drama going on, but some really important things got said about the behavior of the judge, about the behavior of DHS, about the behavior of Steve Walls, and about the fact that they think somehow this is all going to go away for these little children, like they're stupid and don't know who their parents are. Okay? It's child theft. It's child trafficking. Okay? So I asked my attorney, I said, you can't say that someone has the potential to rob a bank and therefore you're going to put him in prison or take his kids away or never let his kids go home because he might rob a bank. Okay? But in 5.5 years or 5 years and 3 months, neither I nor my wife have broken any rules that DHS said for us. I just show up at the building. I visit my kids for an hour a week and watch whatever wreckage is going on. I have very little say. I can't talk about very much. I can bring some toys. I bring really good food like crab and more crab. We call it Crab Thursdays. And so we almost every other Thursday we do crab meat for the kids and fruit and vegetables and fried chicken, whatever they want. Okay, and we bring gifts and we try to make it the best fun time we can make it. This is what I do. Okay, we used to have visits together as a family, and then Aubrey Haverkoff's like, well, we don't want them together as a family because we want to show that Meet You can handle it all on her own, blah blah blah, like that. So then my son says, when are we going to get to see you and meet you together? You're our mom and dad. When are we going to get to see you and meet you together? And I'll tell you what, Sarah Scott and DHS in its entirety does not give a shit about family. Okay, let's get that straight. Okay, so where are we at now? So anyway, this whole thing goes on, and the judge goes, okay, and my wife thought she was going to be stuck with this flatline lawyer, right? And so the judge says, okay, I see it's impossible really to have you not handle this case, and then you do the TPR case. So you're right, we're going to have someone else. And then my lawyer jumped in and said, hey, I know this person might be willing to take the case. And so then they decided that, yeah, the judge would sign off and he wasn't going to be her lawyer anymore, okay? Well, a couple of things could have happened. He could have derailed the whole thing, the lawyer, if he'd said to her, talked to her in private and said, look, I was busy or whatever, I screwed up or whatever, I know I didn't satisfy you by getting into this, give me a second chance, I'm going to get into it and fix it. But nothing. It's just, she won't answer the phone or this or that other thing. I heard phone calls on all this shit going on for like months, okay? And I couldn't contradict or say she was wrong about any of it, all right? So that's what happened today. And so she will get a new lawyer. And so I got to be on the stand. I got to say what I wanted to say about the court. I got to say what I wanted to say to Steve Walls. And I got to have my email read where I said basically a judge would be incompetent if he let this bastard situation continue. Okay? All right. The whole thing is about communication. That if parents and everybody got to communicate, but they fence everything in and try to keep it in these little boxes, if they let everybody communicate, this stuff would get solved a lot faster because people couldn't hide behind their titles and their egos. Okay, so now I want to go into this thing with Judge Hill. I want to name some specifics. In the jurisdictional trial, you knew that DHS had not handed over the photos that were exculpatory, like under the Brady Act, and showed that the witness was lying. You knew the photos existed, and you knew that DHS hadn't handed them over. And so you were not curious about what was in those photos. Then Stacey Headland from Liberty House stood up and said that the photos showed innumerable scarring, that's like scarring without numbers, consistent with torture. Well, the photos, which we've all seen by now except you, showed that Stacey Headland is totally incompetent or she was blatantly lying under oath. Okay? I've seen the photos. There's no scarring like what she's talking about. Okay, so that was used to take jurisdiction. Then my ex-wife, Lucinda Lynn DeMay, from 30-some years ago, gets up on the stand and lies, makes a false accusation, and Matt Jarvis doesn't cross-examine her. And so the photos were not there because Matt Jarvis failed to compel. So in my opinion, Matt Jarvis threw it to the judge on purpose. He was inadequate counsel and he was negligent. And every other attorney since then said, you have to force to compel. You have to compel them to produce the photos. So my second attorney, Jim Leuenberger, he did just that, and we got the photos. 40 photos and a video of the interview at Liberty House, and there is no scarring, okay? I think she has one scar on her leg from surgery. That's it, okay? So Judge Hill knew that those photos weren't provided to us, and he ignored it. So he's either incompetent or he's dishonest. He can take his pick, okay? Because if you take an oath to be fair, then you want to know the facts, okay? You don't want one side hiding all the facts to make the other side look bad and get away with it, all right? So Matt Jarvis threw the court a freebie. Then Matt Jarvis dismissed all my witnesses without my consent. Oh, we'll use them later. Better to do that later. But he didn't get my consent, okay? The guy's a work of art, okay? And then he said to me, oh, the jurisdictional trial is nothing. That's not important. We'll just move on to other things, okay? And so he made no effort. So then the judge brought my ex-wife of 30 years, this Lucinda Lynn DeMay. We were married like a year and a half. He brought her in the stand, and she made false accusations. And Matt Jarvis did not cross-examine her worth anything. Okay, I'll give you an example. You make a false accusation that damns somebody else, okay? And Judge Hill said, I find the witness credible. Okay, now my later attorney protested and said, 30 years, he said, I'm going to rule for a pattern of abuse to justify taking jurisdiction over these kids, okay? Judge Hill said, I'm going to rule a pattern of abuse using testimony from my ex-wife from at least 30 years before. And that's not acceptable under case law. You can't go back that far and try to lock into something and say it's a pattern. That's if it happened. But it didn't happen. And Matt Jarvis, as a deadbeat attorney, didn't ask my ex-wife if you said you saw something bad happen, why didn't you tell the police? Okay, number one, this is for Judge Hill. She didn't tell the police. Number two, she's a registered nurse. She didn't report it to her supervisor. Okay. She got divorced and never mentioned it. Okay. Then it was brought to light that she was doing untoward things with her patients that she had as a visiting nurse that visit people's home, like visiting, guys that are like paralyzed from the waist down or whatever, and providing nursing services in the Salem McMinnville area. And it got brought up to her nursing station in Enterprise, Oregon, that she had engaged in some sexual encounters with patients where she was caught and she was let go from the company. Okay, so ethics violations, it was alleged. Okay, and so the point being that ought to really piss somebody off if anything does. And if it came out that someone jeopardized your job because they said you had done sexual misconduct with patients, you'd think that a person would remember to say, yeah, my husband did thus and so, and I saw him do it. So you would think that someone would say, yeah, I saw this and this happened. And I mean, if there was a fax that came into the nursing station that alleged that you had sexual relations with patients on your other job and you got caught by the patient's wife and you got let go from the job, and that came in as a fax to the nursing station and all the staff saw it, you wouldn't be pissed off and say, yeah, this Matthew McDaniel guy's a sack of shit. He did this and this, right? Okay. She didn't say nothing. All right. I didn't live in the town. I wasn't anywhere nearby, but she didn't say nothing. So then it went on to divorce and she didn't say nothing about it. Okay. And then a year or two later, she was in Salem and she assaulted me. And I called the police and she was arrested. And she was taken to the Marion County Jail and booked on an assault charge. Okay. And I saw her go away in the police car. She had to leave in the back of a police car, handcuffed, down our street. She looked out the window at me. Okay. And I had said, if I had assaulted you, you wouldn't have hesitated to have me arrested. So what's good for the goose is good for the gander. And so she never mentioned anything, never came to her mind, something that she said she saw. Okay. Then DHS, which was called CPS, something like that then, went to her home in Enterprise to check on the well-being of her other kids because of this uncontrolled temper she had. Okay, so it's a home invasion, inspection, interview, whatever. Doesn't that piss you off? I would think so. That would piss you off. Okay, you have to defend yourself. No mention. All these opportunities to say, Matthew did thus and so. No mention. 30 some years later, DHS digs her up. She comes into court and says explicitly, my ex-husband did this. No one asks her, why didn't you report it? You had all these hyper opportunities to report it and grind this guy into the dirt and have him arrested. You never did it. Why? Because it never happened. Okay? And so Judge Hill let that go on and said, I find the witness credible, and based on what she said and the other things that we have from people like Stacey Hedlund, I'm going to take jurisdiction of these children. Okay, so that happened January 31st and February 1st, 2018. Then they have this attitude of whatever I ruled, that's in stone. Tough luck. Okay, so a bunch of people lied. It doesn't matter. Tough luck. Okay, so that goes on. And then they take things that my wife says through a translator and they separate them, parse them out, separate them out, and change the meaning, and then accuse her of it. Okay? They accuse her of it. And so that goes on. So then Jim Leuenberger comes into the scene and he says, we got the photos. We want a retrial. Here's our reason why we want a retrial is we have new evidence. Okay. And Judge Hill says, not the least bit curious, motivated to not let this case go by and slip out of his hand for any reason. He says, well, did the photos exist in December of 2017? My lawyer says, yes, they did. He said, then it's not new evidence. And he basically said, and it's in the transcript, I've got it. He basically said, well, if you didn't get the photos, that's your problem. So this is a judge saying, I don't care about what the photos say. It has nothing to do with the case. I decide on personality and I decide on how I want to see this whole thing go. And if you have a bunch of photos that show that somebody lied and perjured themselves, that's what you're suggesting, I'm not interested. That's not how we play in this court. I'm not interested in facts. I'm just interested in railroading a family, okay? So then it's very unjust that you would accuse me of doing something based on these witnesses, so-called, and that you would use that to keep my wife from getting her 2 little kids back, okay? Now, in 5 years, 3 months, she hasn't broken any rules. In 5 years, 3 months, I haven't broken any rules. And you don't consider that necessary and relevant to the fact you just keep talking risk, okay? So you've conjured the risk and you've decided that it's big deal, too much risk, okay? Well, the law says something along the lines that the burden of proof is on the state in this dismissal hearing that we're going to bring up against the state, that the law says that the state has to prove that there's imminent harm. That's very much different, very much beyond imminent perceived risk. It's imminent harm. So if you know the guy's going to go home and beat the kids and his wife, you know, or the wife's going to go on a bender, or he's going to go on a bender, and they say, no, we can't let the kids go home. Okay, you know, if you see the guy, you know, document the guy or the gal going and getting a big meth buy and headed home with it, they're chewed up. Yeah, you can say imminent harm. Okay. But you don't have that here in any way or form. Okay. So that's where the case is. That's my problems with this case, is that people are allowed to lie in your court and you don't have the least curiosity about what the photos show. And we asked for a retrial based on no cross-examination of certain people, based on Stacey Headland's false statements about torture and scarring. And so how it worked was when my attorney, Jim Leuenberger, subpoenaed Stacey Headland for sometime in May in the court, 2018, she didn't show. So my lawyer said, what do we do? We have her arrested. She didn't answer to a subpoena. She thumbed off at the court. Judge Hill said, we don't do that here. Well, you think they wouldn't do that for me? You damn right they do it for me. So that's bullshit. So then we subpoenaed her again, and she showed up in October. So now the scam was on. Brian Raymer was there, and the judge asked, so we called Stacey Headland to the stand, and my attorney started to ask her questions like, what's your training as a doctor? What's your training in recognizing scars? How do you know something's a scar and what it's not? And he asked her about 5 questions to get to, how are you qualified to decide what a scar is? Okay. And every question he asked, Brian Raymer said objection, and Judge Hill said sustained every single time. And finally, my attorney turned to me and said, he's not going to let me question the witness. And so I turned to the judge and said, no further questions. And now, maybe Judge Hill can explain that to me, that is not bias, not the least bit curious about what Jim wanted to know from the witness, because he knew, too, that the witness was probably lying and that's what Jim had, which he did, proof that she was lying because he had photos. Okay, So going back again to the trial, the first 2 days, which were crucial, my attorney asked the accuser, why did you recant your accusations? Okay. So this was a really big deal because the accuser went to the DHS office and recanted to Katie Jones. But Judge Hill wanted to make it out that my wife had forced her to recant. Okay. So she said, well, my stepmom said she'd cut my hair off, or she started cutting my hair and said that I had to recant, or she just keep cutting my hair. And so my attorney, Matt Jarvis, said, well, can you show us where she cut your hair to now? And this was like March. No, this was like somewhere in the first month, maybe at the judicial hearing. And she said, like to hear. He said, well, can you show with your hand where she cut your hair to? Like here. And so she said, yeah, like right here. Okay. My stepmom cut my hair off to right here. And so then my attorney and my wife's attorney presented time-stamped photos of that same period of time that showed her hair in the middle of her back had never been cut. And Judge Hill said, I'm going to go with that her mom cut her hair to force her to recant. No evidence to the contrary. And Judge Hill says, I'm going to go with saying that her stepmom cut her hair to force her to recant. Okay? Remember, it has a ring of truth, like Lord of the Rings. It has a ring of truth. This is a ring courtroom, okay? We do rings of truth here. Rings of falsehood, rings of truth. Okay, that's what we do, all right? So somebody's lying, okay? So that's how it went along. And yes, that makes me say that the judge is biased and that the court doesn't care anything about taking away kids and keeping them. It's money, and they will distort what witnesses say. They will accept lying witnesses, and then they will protect lying witnesses, and then they will say that parents said things they didn't say. So I notably never testified in this trial till today. And then I said what I had to say. I don't think they want me back on the stand because I'm going to say a lot of stuff for the record that they're not going to like. And so anyway, by adopting these two little kids out, they're not going to end the story for those two little kids. They're just going to further traumatize them. And even Judge Hill said, what do I do? Keep these kids in purgatory? Well, you send them home. They're in purgatory for 5 years. Yeah, so what do? You extend it? You think that, what's the end game here? What are you thinking? Are you smoking crack? What do you think is going to happen to these kids? You think that they're just going to all Mary go away? The whole thing's going to blow over. They're going to forget they even have a farm 15 miles from their foster home, that they have ATVs parked in the barn, that they got a tractor, they got all kinds of cats sitting on the porch when they get there every time. They got, electric train in the living room. They got bedrooms of their own. They're just going to forget about that in this big house and this 12-acre farm, just going to forget about it. And you think that the foster mom, anybody involved, is that this is just going to actually go away? That's my question. And so they don't act in the best interest of the child. They act in the best interest of the state. It's not in the best interest of parents. It's not best interest of the state. So like I asked the court, through my attorneys, what do I have to do to prove that I have no interest in going to the property? Who would, in their right mind, if someone can make false accusations the first time and get away with it, why would you risk, if you're trying to get your two little kids home to be with their other brothers and sisters, 4 of them, why would you risk jeopardizing that? I mean, are these people crazy or what? Why would you do it? You've been through court for 5 years and 3 months. Why would you go there and risk them being taken away again? And they can't, are they saying that, oh, well, now we can't take them away? So why would you go there? A neighbor could call a false report in. DHS, as a posing as a neighbor or spectator, could call in a report 6 months later. Why would you risk it? There's no way you would be crazy enough to risk it without invitation from DHS. And they did invite me one time to go to one of the visits at the farm, and then Ross Waite, that slob, he made out to the court as if I went there without permission, and I showed all the texts where I was invited, and I told him when I got there and when I left, and he just blew it off, and the court said, why are you trying to make this guy look like he did something he wasn't supposed to do? You had agreement, okay? And so that's how DHS operates. It's probably happened to a lot of you people out there. Have your kids taken away and DHS lies. They do all this stuff. The court colludes with them. CASA colludes with them. We had this old man, Neil Clark, sitting in the courtroom. And he's just as dishonest as all the rest of them. So you got Steve the Weasel at the end of the table. You've got the blob, Sarah Scott, sitting next to him. Then you have Hernandez. Okay, and she doesn't care about mothers and children either. I doubt she has any kids. And then you've got Neil Clark, and Michu said very clearly, I'm very good at my kids and I take good care of them. So anyway, that's probably, think about your cases and publicize what's done to you in the courts and what happens to you. And yes, the court is biased, and money is what determines everything. And people feel free to lie in the court, and they use it to destroy lives as long as they get money. And I challenge anybody who's an accountant to tell me how much money has been made off my children in 5 years and 3 months, because that's what this is all about. It's about the power of the court to do to you what we want. Make sure you understand that. We can do what we want to you and go from there. So that's what I have to say. There's probably more, but this is already a long video, and I just want to say those things. That's how people are behaving in this case, and we'll never quit fighting for these kids. And you won't erase us from the lives of these kids either. We've got better kids than that. They know they can always come to us and ask for what they need, for support, and so figure it out. And karma's a bitch. So to give you an idea of what a kangaroo court this is, the family court, my wife's come in to say her lawyer's not doing his job. She wants a different lawyer, different court-appointed lawyer. She comes in and gives all these examples of how Gary, her lawyer, has failed to do his job. So Steve Walls, he's the lawyer for the kids. And he gets up and says, well, just because you're not happy with your lawyer doesn't mean you get a new one. And then the DOJ lawyer, Ms. Hernandez, gets up and she goes, I think he's a really good lawyer. So you have to think about this. The two people that are basically prosecuting to make sure that the children don't go back to their mother, they're saying that this do-nothing lawyer, he's really great. He's doing a great job. That's why we're progressing to take away your children. So what's the problem? And it's just hilarious that these unprofessional shenanigans go on in the court, just blatant attempts to run people over and railroad them and take their children. And it's over the top. I think one of the really poignant memories I have for this case in front of Judge Hill was when one of my 4 children that returned home said in court, why is it that you believe the person accusing, but you won't believe any of the 4 of us? siblings. And Judge Hill said, I've already made up my mind about that. In other words, my impression was that we only listen to witnesses who go along with our agenda, our narrative about how this is going to turn out. Says something, doesn't it?